So any questions here so far from the online people or from anyone from the rooms?
Yeah, I have a question about network layout. What is the network layout of the nodes that you're bringing up? Since OpenStack has seemed like it has usually two network interfaces.
Yes.
And is it do you create the nodes of two or setting up public and private?
What happens is once we bring up OpenStack, we have a VLAN set up for each of the different networks. So we have a compute VLAN, we have a storage VLAN. There's a VLAN dedicated to admin operations. There's also a VLAN dedicated to the BMC controllers. So the bar clamp brings those up. The networking bar clamp brings them up as the systems get deployed. David, you want to add something to that?
Question was tuned out on something else. What was that?
There was a question on the boot failed. Okay. A question on networking and how it is set up.
You just want to know what the networks are. They're a public and private network.
That depends on how you configure your network topology.
So he's asking here, how are they set up?
So you have to go to your virtual networks.
Yeah. So
go to File.
you want to see? Oh, you want to see it here.
It should tell you what your virtual networks.
I assume it's a flat.
I'm pretty sure it's probably nothing. It's just a false.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in VMware, it is set up as two host-only networks, as you can see here. We turn off the local DHCP, so it doesn't interfere with the admin node, because the admin node acts as the DHCP server. And we have two networks configured. Network one is 192.168.124.0, which is what we use for all the communication with the UIs. And the other network, 128, is the other NIC, right, David?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and admin node is always 192.168.124.10.
That's right. Yep.
So actually that brings up a question,
Yeah.
Which is in a live production system, the DHCP is unlikely to be, there may be a conflict with there being a DHCP.
Well, this should be an island, right? So there shouldn't be a conflict. DHCP should always be handled by the admin node.
So I actually have a question about this. You said it should be an island. Now, typically I'd want to install it on the management network. That have the Crowbar server on the management network.
You wouldn't want that, because Crowbar is going to go out and do bad things to your network, right? So it's an isolated, the cloud is going to be isolated.
So would you install Crowbar in like each rack, each subnet?
Yeah, if you look at the reference architecture, it's pretty clear how you should lay it out. It's kind of a pod. You have a number of servers and you have switched off a rack, and that's supposed to be encapsulated into a pod.
That's not how we did it.
Oh, okay.
We did it on the management network.
Well, there's some serious danger of doing that, right? Because if you have a box in that network that's set to network root, it's going to find Crowbar, and Crowbar is going to flag.
We modified the Crowbar server.
Right. So, but out of the box, that could definitely happen.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been a little glitch here, so I need to power off these nodes and restart them again.
So you're making an assumption that Crowbar there's going to be a Crowbar server in each subnetwork. So under the top network.
Yes.
Hi.
So Andy is here. There was a question on the line about how public and private networks are set up with this configuration. So if you could answer that, I'm trying to get this demo to work.
So in a VM environment, actually, as of about 3 days ago, Rob has. Let me backtrack. In a production environment, our standard reference architecture layers the different logical networks on top of the VLANs. So we use the standard hardware configuration in our reference architecture has 2 NICs in every node. One of them is with flat switching. So to simplify the physical design, all the NICs are assumed are to be connected into the same switch fabric in every rack, which basically lets you almost completely ignore physical considerations. Logically, we have the admin network set up on a physical NIC because we need the various crowbar state machine operations, pixie booting, and the control plane works on the VLAN 0/physical network. The other logical networks are set up to be on VLANs, and you can edit the network JSON and see how that is laid out. In a VM environment like we're running the demos in, we found that VLANs work okay as long as you're communicating between VMs. But if you're trying to go off the virtual network that VMware VirtualBox is setting up between the VMs and connect into that environment, VLANs are hit and miss, mostly miss. So to simulate, it's a lot easier to add virtual NICs in a virtual environment. So the way we lay it out in a virtual environment is basically add 4 NICs into every VM, such that every logical network can have its own virtual NIC in a VM, and you can make decisions in VMware or VirtualBox and connect it to where you need it to go. So for example, if you want to have the public network, the one that the various endpoints are exposed on, the OpenStack dashboard or the Nova API or whatever else needs to be publicly accessible outside of the crowbar environment, you can hook up that virtual NIC to wherever you need it to go. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm bringing up Node 2 here. Node 2 is being discovered as we speak, and as soon as it's discovered, it'll show up on the screen here. As I said, it brings up a few test machines as it brings it up, doing some validation checks, etc. And you'll notice that a couple of things will show up here on the screen as it does that. And once it comes up, we can decide how we want to allocate that node. We want that to be a Nova node, or you can make that decision now or later. I decided to make that decision now. I want to make Node 2 a Nova node, and I will set up the appropriate hardware BIOS settings as appropriate for that node. So you see here, it's just brought up this test, machine as it's bringing it up. So as soon as that finishes up, I'm going to allocate this machine.
So where is it that you said in here that it would be a Nova node?
I haven't done that yet. As soon as it comes up and it's ready, I'm going to show you that I'll allocate it now.
Okay.
So I'll say I want it to be part of a Nova group, Nova cluster group, right? I'll give it a name so I have a way of identifying and working with it in the future. And then later on, I will install or deploy the Nova component on it. So that's how it all works. So it's coming up now, and as soon as it comes up, I'm going to allocate that node. So while that's going on, let me also bring up another node. So I think this is up now. So there it is. So you see this blinking light that says it's pending. So I can go in here and actually edit this node and say this is where I say this is my Nova node 1. Right? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
So I'm saying this is my Nova node 1, and I want this to be part of my Nova cluster. So I'm just creating a group and making it part of my Nova cluster. And once I allocate this, it'll go ahead and install the operating system on it. So the node is allocated successfully. So that's going to be my future Nova node. That's where I'm going to install Nova.
So now Chef is pushing that information out, saying you're a Nova node, let me send you what you need.
We haven't gotten to that point yet. At this point, it is doing a hardware. So we just discovered everything about that node from a hardware perspective, right? Now, when I allocate it, I'm saying this needs to be a Nova node, which means I want the BIOS to be set with a certain set of settings. I want the RAID to be, the RAID setting to be RAID 10. So all of those decisions you're making here.
Okay, so now it's doing it.
Now it's going through and basically installing the hardware, which means that it is configuring the BIOS, it's configuring the RAID settings, and it's going ahead and once it does that, it'll go ahead and install the operating system. So that's what's happening right here. You can see it says hardware installed, right? So that's what's going on. And if you go back and look at what's happening, it'll go through and do a series of tests. So you can see it's doing that. And then once it's done with that, it'll go ahead and install the operating system automatically. So that's going on. I want to pull up another node in the meantime. So I'll go ahead and clone another one of these guys. I'll just do a two node operation this time, just to keep things simple. I'll do some music is coming here. Yeah. So there's my node 3. I'll call this my Nova node. So keep this simple and quick. I will make this my Nova controller, right? And I'm going to go ahead and power this one up on as well. All right, so the hardware is installed, and this system is coming up. So now you can see Node 2 is installing the operating system. So it'll bring up the, it's installing Ubuntu 12.04, and once that's up and running, we are ready to start applying proposals to it. You know, you want to put a particular deployment on top of it, then we apply a bar clamp. So which I'll do in a second here. So let me go back to the bar clamps and look at the, so we're getting ready to install Nova. So if you look at the different bar clamps, in order to get Nova installed, you have to have a number of prerequisites. So you need to have a MySQL server up and running, because that's what Nova uses for managing all of its instances, all the data about the running infrastructure is stored in MySQL. The Rabbit messaging system uses MySQL. Keystone is the authentication mechanism, which is required by Nova again. So we'll go ahead and install both of these. But before I do that, I actually need the controller node. So let me go back and make sure that I have my controller node up and running here. So my second node is powering up here. It's Pixie booting as we speak. So it'll go through the same discovery process. I'll make this the controller node. So again, this is where I make the allocation and say this is my controller node as opposed to a Nova node. So back to this install state diagram, which is really what we're going through right here. So we've discovered the node here. This is the allocation piece where it waits for user input for hardware installation. And then the hardware install is just finished. The base OS is going on right now. And then once that's done, it's ready for a particular role. So I made the decision earlier during the allocation of the node that I want this to be a Nova node because of the way I configured the hardware. So at this point, once it gets to this ready role, I'm going to install Nova on it. And that's where the chef recipe, or the bar clamp for Nova and the appropriate chef recipes kick in, and then the appropriate bits are laid down at that point. So we'll see where that is. Okay, here we go. So go back to, so Node 2 is still in the process of installing the operating system, which means we are in this install OS state right here. And once that's done, it'll be ready for a role. And the other node is going through the discovery process. So let's see where that one is at. So if you go back to the nodes, you'll see this guy is now waiting for input. So this is the allocation piece. So I'm going to make this a controller node, right? Because I want to put all the controller functions on this one, and I'll make it part of the controller group. Now, since we have a fairly small deployment cluster here, one controller node should take care of it. But if you have a fairly large deployment, then you might want to have multiple controller nodes. all part of a controller group, which is why I created that. So I'm going to go ahead and allocate this guy. So now that's going to come up, which means it is going to go back. So if you go back to the, so we just discovered the node, we have allocated the node, we have set it as a controller node. Now it's going to go ahead and do the BIOS configuration and the hardware install, and it'll reboot and install the OS. And that's what's going to be happening with node 3 at this point.